The Toronto Master Gardeners present All About Seeds.
Greetings gardeners, Toronto Master Gardener Tina here, and I am so excited today to talk to you about growing plants from seeds. Why should you grow plants from seeds? Well, variety, quantity, and quality. The variety of plants available to grow from seed will far outweigh the selection of plants that you get at any nursery. So, for example, I have a couple of seed catalogs here. If I look at this one, and I'm going to grow tomatoes, I might get at the nursery in the springtime maybe 5 or 6, probably 2 or 3 choices of tomatoes that I can grow. But if I look in the seed catalog, there are over 7 pages of different varieties of tomatoes that I can grow. So again, the varieties and the possibilities are absolutely endless. Plus you'll get a lot of different things that you would not be able to get at a nursery. Some really unique things. One year I grew loofahs, which was very exciting. The second issue is quantity. It is so much cheaper and more cost effective to order a package of seeds for $3 or $4 and end up with, if you want to start them all, anywhere from 20 to 120 plants. So it's very cost effective in that way to end up with a lot more plants. Now you may not want to start all of them. You may want to consider that when you're sitting looking through these catalogs on a cold January day with a glass of wine, don't let the wine go to your head, and you order way more seeds than you're going to grow because you're going to have to store them. Some seeds store very well, some seeds not so well. So consider that. So quantity is another reason why we want to grow from seed. Very useful if you're trying to start a meadow, native plants, a lot of your annuals. If you have a big garden and you want to start a lot of petunias or zinnias, very easy to start from seed. Again, very cheap to get a $4 package of seeds and end up with 100 different zinnias in your garden. The last issue is quality. If you're starting your plant from seed, you know where the seed came from, you know what kind of soil you've put it in, and you know what kind of pesticides, hopefully none, that you've grown these seedlings organically. So you know exactly what you're getting yourself into, and you're going to end up with a very good quality plant. Tender loving care given to you. Raising it right from the little seedling to when it's a grown-up plant. So another advantage of growing from seed. Variety, quantity, and quality. Okay, so what do you do when you get the seeds? The most important thing you need to do to start with, there's where I store my seeds, is look at your seed package. Your seed package, as well as the seed catalogs, give you all the information on how to start your seeds. You don't have to remember anything that I'm telling you right now because it's all going to be on your seed packages and specifically designed to that particular plant because seeds germinate differently depending on the plant.
Let's reiterate. What important information should you find on the back of your seed package? There should be a description of the plant. Is it an annual, a perennial? Does it tolerate shade? What color is the flower going to be? Information like that. I think the most important thing that the seed package should tell you is when to start the seeds. Some seeds you can plant outdoors when there is no longer a risk of frost. Many of our seeds we want to start indoors so that we can get a head start on our very short growing season. It varies. Usually the seed package will tell you how many weeks before our last frost date the seed should be started. Some of them have to start in January, February, but most start in March or April. It's very important not to plant them any earlier than recommended. This is a common mistake, especially with tomatoes. If you plant them too early, they don't have the right conditions and they end up getting long and leggy and weak, and the plant is never ever really strong, even when you do get it outside to the garden. The seed packet should also tell you if it needs any special treatment: cold stratification, scarification, extra soaking, heat, light, things like that. It should tell you how long it's going to take till it germinates. It will tell you how deep in the soil to plant the seed. It will tell you, once you get the plants out into the garden, how much space there should be between each plant and between each row. The back of the seed package will tell you when you can expect harvest or when you can expect to see flowers. There should also be a date on the package saying either when it was packaged or when the seeds are viable until. What happens if you don't have a seed packet because you harvested your own seeds? No worries. You can ask a Toronto Master Gardener. Go to our website, torontomastergardener.ca, and put your question in or see if your question's already been answered. You can check the seed catalogs. Most seed catalogs are online now, and if they sell the seed, they're going to tell you how to sow the seed. Another great resource is the Ontario Rock Garden and Hardy Plant Society. They have a great germination guide, over 8,000 different seeds. I find it particularly useful when I'm trying to germinate native seeds that I've collected from my garden.
So I'm just going to start here. I actually have some bird of paradise seeds that I'm going to start. And yes, you don't have to grow just vegetables from seed. You can grow houseplants from seed. I actually grew this cactus from seed and this string of hearts, Cereopagia. It actually bloomed. The seeds came from the bloom and I started them. They were very, very successful. I have a lot of them, some to give away actually. Okay, so the instructions for this tells me that this seed needs some special attention. It needs to have a little bit of scarification, and many seeds will need some sort of special treatment. So this tells me that I need to take these little orange tufts on the seed. It's a very hard seed coat, and I need to rub it with a little bit of sandpaper. Make sure you're working on a good surface so that when the seeds jump around, you can find them again. So I'm going to give this a little bit of a rough with sandpaper. Sometimes it will say that it needs a cold treatment, so that you need to put it in the fridge. Very common with our native flower seeds, that they need to be in the fridge for a little while, which of course mimics how they are in nature, right? Okay, so I've given this a little bit of a rough up. It said to take the orange tuft off the top, which I have done. I've given it a bit of a scratch. This is so the moisture can get into the seed and start it to germinate. Okay. Now a lot of seeds too, especially ones from Australia and South Africa, like this one is, need some sort of fire to start. So they've sent me a little piece of liquid fire to make this seed germinate. And it tells me that I'm to put this in and to let it sit for 24 hours before I actually plant it. So there we go. Set that aside, and tomorrow morning I will plant that. Because there's only 2 of the seeds, I'll probably put them in just a little pot so I can keep an eye on them. Okay, but a lot of our seeds, especially our vegetable seeds, much easier to grow. This is my favorite thing to start seeds in, okay? It's like its own little greenhouse. Shallow enough that when they get big enough I can transplant them. I'm not wasting a whole bunch of soil, which is expensive. And it's got a lid on it, which gives it, keeps the moisture in the soil, and it's got holes in it so that it gets good air circulation. Soil, okay. I want to pick, you can buy seedling mixes, but I always just use what's called a soilless mix. Soilless mix is made up of peat moss, some sort of perlite, these little white dots in there, and sometimes a bit of organic material. Now you don't have to worry about fertilizer in the soil or organic material when you're starting your seeds, because seeds actually come in their cases with their own fertilizer, their own food to get them started. Mother Nature was very clever. So the advantages of a soilless mix: holds moisture, but also lets a lot of air through to the roots and good drainage. So that's my favorite thing. Now I make sure that my soil is a little bit moist, but I don't soak it. Okay, these seeds, again, it will tell you how deep to plant them. General rule is twice as deep as the width of the seed. This is just some lovely little bit of mesclun mix, some little leafy things that I'm going to be able to have in salad or on my sandwiches. It tells me it likes it cool, which is great. I can put it on my windowsill where it's sunny. It tells me how much light I need. It tells me how to plant it. Some seeds, in fact, don't even need to be covered in soil, and your seed package will tell you that as well. So I'm going to package it, sprinkle it around a little bit. Try not to get them too close together, but close enough. Okay. Then I'm going to take it to my sink and I'm going to sprinkle it with water. I have a lovely shower head on my sink, much to my husband's dismay when he comes to get his coffee, and there's lots of plants in the sink, but for a good cause. Okay, I'm going to lightly tamp it down and then add my water to it. I like to add the water mostly after I've planted the seeds, because then it settles the seeds in the soil and I know I've got good contact with the soil. I'm going to label it. I cannot tell you how many times I have planted seeds and not known what they were until they're like 2 or 3 inches high. So just get a popsicle stick and label what you've got. Leafy greens, and I'm going to put that in there, and I'm going to put the lid on, and I'm good to go. Let me say a little bit more about temperature. After your seeds have absorbed enough moisture, the next most important factor in germination is temperature. Each seed has an optimum range where it will germinate. Fortunately for us, most seeds germinate between a 15-degree and 25-degree Celsius range. Placing them on a warm, sunny windowsill should be just fine. If you don't have a warm, sunny windowsill, you can use artificial lighting. Put it on a timer for anywhere between 12 and 16 hours, and that should be great for germination. If you don't think you can achieve that heat, you can buy something called a seedling heat mat, available at most nurseries. They're not that expensive. Just like a heating pad that you would use, it increases the heat of the soil. Finally, remember, there is an optimum range for germination for all seeds, and if you're growing a native seed or something that needs cold stratification, you do have to treat that seed specially. Okay. I'm going to come out and check them every single morning. Some things germinate so quickly. It is so exciting. Quite an air of anticipation when I get my cup of tea, come out to the greenhouse every morning and lift the lid to see if any of my seeds have germinated. Once you've done that, you have to make sure that the soil is going to be moist. You cannot let your seedlings dry out. Seeds need the moisture to germinate. So make sure you can't plant them in March and then go away on holidays for a couple of weeks and come back to expect them to be still alive. You need to check them every single day. When it starts to get hot and sunny too, and the seeds have started to grow, you have to absolutely make sure that you come out and that they're not going to be suffering from too much moisture. They need to have good air circulation around them so that they don't get any kind of fungal disease like damp off. Very, very sad if you seedlings suffer from damp off, because you'll come out and they'll all just have died. They get weak in the stem and then they just collapse. So you've got to start again with fresh soil. So once they get to be a little bit bigger, like these ones,
or these ones, you'll definitely want to take the lid off when you see the moisture starting to condense on the roof of your little mini greenhouse. This usually happens midday when it's quite warm and sunny and the soil starts to heat up. So take the lid off, let the air circulate to prevent those fungal diseases, and then put the lid back on to keep the heat in for the evening when it's much cooler. How do you know when your seedlings are big enough to transplant? Well, once they've developed a second set of leaves, called their true leaves, then they're ready to go into bigger pots. They're called true leaves because these are the ones that are representative of the entire plant. The first two leaves that emerge are somewhat generic. That's why it's really important to label your seeds, because you won't be able to tell what the plant is by the first two leaves that appear. Now is also the time that you can start fertilizing them, getting them strong, making the roots and the leaves develop so that they're ready to go into the garden.
So you can transplant into, if you've saved all your cell packs from the annuals that you bought last year, the last time you're going to buy them, because now you're going to start all of yours from seed, but you can start the transplant into here, or little tiny pots, which is what I'm going to use today. Or you want to make sure that they're not putting them in too big a home, though, because if I put them in a great big pot like this, the pot would be way too much water in there for a little tiny seedling. But I might plant 3 or 4 in there and then end up, it'll be one of my containers come spring. Okay, so this is kind of a scary part. You really think that you're going to do damage to these poor little seedlings, but you really won't. So I have a lovely skewer here, and I just gently rip apart bit by bit, and then you can either use your skewer or your hand to pull them gently apart. Get as much of the root as you can. It's kind of painstaking work. I put on a book tape or my favorite iTunes or something while I'm doing this, because it does take a bit of time. I hold it by the leaf. You can see here's my pots. I make a little tiny hole with my skewer. I use my skewer to put the roots in. There we go. And put the seed around it. Now these are quite tiny seedlings, and I might, because I've got hundreds in there, I may put 2 or 3 in there, which is absolutely fine. I'm quite happy to plant it as a bunch. It'll be happy once it gets into my garden, and it saves a lot of soil and time and space. So again, I'm going to take them. There's lovely roots. I can hold it very gently by the leaf. And again, I'm going to make a hole with my skewer, and I'm going to take the roots, and I can just gently put them in. Gently, gently. About the same depth as I've taken them out. Some things can be a little bit deeper, like your tomato seedlings. You can plant them much deeper because they'll grow roots. So if I had a tomato seedling, I would plant it almost half of what was showing, I would put under the ground. That makes for good strong roots. So I just keep going and going and going until I have transplanted all of these little seedlings one by one. And they do look a little bit sad at first. I will take them now and again to the sink and give them a good watering. If they get, sometimes the leaves get pushed down, I'll take my skewer again and just prop them up a little bit. Again, I like to do that because if I sprinkle the water, I know that there's been good soil contact with the roots. And these are perennials. These are Lobelia cardinalis, native plants that I'm taking up north to plant. I'm rewilding an old farm, so I'm growing a lot of native plants from seed, trying to get rid of some of the invasive plants up there and put back some native ones. Okay, so I'm going to leave all of this, and I'm going to plant the whole tray, and then again leave it in a sunny spot, well watered. Don't let them dry out. They won't be very happy dried out. When they get to be about this big, again, this is a native plant. This is a great blue lobelia. Beautiful, beautiful plant if you don't have it in your garden. Does a lot of self-seeding too, which is great. When they get to be about this big, I would consider putting them out into my garden. Sometimes even smaller, I'll put them out into my garden, because younger things, the smaller they are, the better they adapt, as long as they're protected and you keep them well watered. Okay, but I have been growing these indoors, either under lights, I do grow them under lights, or in my greenhouse. I'm very spoiled to have a greenhouse. I cannot take these little seedlings that have been protected and sheltered and take them out to the garden immediately. I have to do something called hardening them off. If I did that, if I took them out there, they would go into shock.
It's the sudden contrast of indoor and outdoor environment. Outdoor, the seedlings will be exposed to unfiltered sunlight, wind, more variation in temperature, the soil's going to dry out faster, and this sudden change is just too much for a little sheltered seedling to take. So we have to make this a gradual getting used to being outside.
So come when I'm getting ready to put them out in the garden. For most plants, if you're doing it outside, it would be in Toronto. Our last frost date is May 10th, around there. So I could start doing it after that. Depending again on the plant, make sure you read about your plant. If it's a tomato, I'm not taking it outside till it's warm. They will just pout if it's too cold. Things like these native plants, they can go out much, much earlier. They're hardier. I'm going to take them out the first morning in kind of a sheltered spot, and I'm going to bring them in again at lunchtime. And the next day I'm going to do the same thing. Take them out in the morning, leave them there till about lunchtime, bring them in. And over the course of the next week or two, again depending on how hardy the plant is, I'm going to increase how long I leave them outside, till eventually they're outside for the full day, and then eventually outside overnight. They are now used to being outside and very happy to go into your garden. Okay, excellent. If you're not, so for example, these are seeds I started in the spring. These again are the cardinal flowers. They need to be transplanted. They will be going outside in my garden, but I don't have a spot for them yet. I'm going to have to winter them over. So I'm going to transplant them into much bigger pots, and I'm going to end up with a much bigger plant. If you're doing plant sales, if you're growing from seed for plant sales or to give to friends, you probably want them to get a little bit bigger, because your friends and those don't look quite as attractive as when they get to be quite this big. So all of these ones I'm going to transplant into bigger pots, and I'm going to sink them in my vegetable garden for the winter and let Mother Nature look after them. And then in the springtime, hopefully, I'll have my new pond up at the farm, and I'll be able to plant all these native plants around there. So I think that's it for growing plants from seed. Oh, one more thing. For example, this year I grew a lot of zinnias. I didn't used to like zinnias. I thought they were kind of boring and old-fashioned, but they do really put on quite a show, and they're very, very, very reliable. Very, very easy to grow from seed. You don't even have to start them early. Sometimes people just throw them into the garden, or you could start some early from seed and then succession, like just keep throwing them in. So it is now September when I'm making this video, and I'm going to go out in the next 3 mornings and start seed harvesting so that I have zinnia seeds for next year. I'm going to make sure that I label them, because that is another downfall I have. I have all of these lovely seeds from previous years in envelopes, and I always think I'm going to remember, but I have no idea what they are. Although these ones I do know are marigolds. They're a pretty distinctive seed. So if you've been very successful and enjoyed plants that you grew from seed out in your garden, do go out and harvest them. The seeds will actually even be, the plants next year will actually probably grow better in your garden, because the plant has grown up in that environment. When we get seeds from different places, we don't know where they came from. They were used to a different environment. So these seeds are well adapted to your garden and will grow that much better next year. So once you've collected your seeds, how do you store them? Well, you want to keep them in a place that's dry for sure and cool. So some seeds you'll keep in the fridge. Some seeds are just happy, as I said, in an envelope labeled so that you know where they are. How long will they last? Well, that varies with the seed. Some seeds have to immediately be planted, or they're not going to germinate. Some of the house plants, like cyclamen, if you've ever tried to grow cyclamen from seed.
According to our gardening guide, Growing from Seed, which is available all the time on the Toronto Master Gardener website, annual seeds are viable for about 2 to 3 years, vegetables up to 10 years, and perennials anywhere from 2 until 20 years. But it really does depend upon the plant. Consider Methuselah, a Judean date palm that was germinated after 2,000 years.
A good way to test if they're viable is to get paper towel, dampen it, don't make it soaking wet, dampen it, enough so that the seeds can pull the moisture in. Put your paper towel out, put the seeds on top, fold it over, put it in a plastic bag, and leave it for a couple of days, making sure it doesn't go moldy, to see if you get any sprouts from the seeds. That's a good way to see if it's viable.
Another test you can try if the seeds are large enough is to put them in a cup of water and soak them for a few hours. The seeds that sink most likely are viable. The seeds that float, probably not so viable. And remember, if you're going to be planting these seeds anyway, it's really good to soak them for a few hours ahead of time. Let them absorb that extra moisture that's going to give them a head start when you put them in the soil.
Other than that, you can just try and plant them and see what happens. Always worth it, much better than throwing them out. I hope you've enjoyed learning about seeds and how to grow all sorts of exotic, wonderful plants from seed. It's one of the most rewarding things that a gardener can do. If you have any questions, please do go to the Toronto Master Gardener website. We have growing guides there. We have 5,000 questions already answered, so I'm sure that your question will be there. If it isn't, then you can submit it and you will get an expert answer within a couple of days. So thanks very much for listening. Toronto Master Gardener Tena, off to collect some seeds.